What's more likely to happen first? The Penguins get a new head coach, or Kris Letang is traded away from Pittsburgh?
I'll go Kris Letang. I'll go with Kris Letang. I can remember, this is a random thought. I can remember asking, we were on with the guys from around the 412, and I think the Steelers had just hired Mike Sullivan as the quarterback's coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of my random questions was which Mike Sullivan gets fired first or leaves town first. And their answer was the quarterback's coach. And you'd have to tell me, did that happen yet?
No, he's still there.
He's still there?
I think he's the assistant quarterback's coach. There's 2 quarterback's coaches right now because they hired Tom Arth, but
okay.
Besides the point.
Yeah, so that fight is still on. That being said, Pittsburgh, or the Penguins organization, they really like Mike Sullivan. They like what he can do. I still really like Mike Sullivan in terms of can be a good coach, give him good players, seems like an awesome dude in general, just saying that. And I feel like I'll keep backing him. I get the idea of there might need to be change with the coaching pool here. I understand that. I don't know if the Penguins organization understands that, or at least I don't know if they want to understand that for decent enough reason. Again, he is one of the top coaches in the league, just hasn't had a great set of players. The Kris Letang of it all is very interesting because I don't know where he stands in the organization. The trade deadline talk, I mean, there was no trade deadline talk around him, but a lot of the conversations that guys like Josh Yohe and Rob Rossi were having leading up to the trade deadline was it's uncertain if Letang legitimately finishes his career in Pittsburgh. He's got a lot of term left still, and that Montreal team could use a good veteran to lead them in terms of just being an elder statesman, being a champion. And that will be the only team I connect him to just because it makes the most sense. And I could see that happening I could see that happening before Mike Sullivan heading out. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, as of right now, Kris Letang has 3 years remaining on his contract after this one. Next year is the final year that he has a full no movement clause. After that, he submits a 10-team list that the Penguins would be able to trade him to. But I think we all know the likely destination if Kris Letang were to leave Pittsburgh. It would probably be the Montreal Canadiens. When I look at this, I have to first think of Mike Sullivan because coaching, I mean, you have to go with the guy that's been here the shortest amount of time, which is surprisingly enough, Mike Sullivan, who's been here for 10 years now. Kris Letang has been here for what? 20? Running on 20, 17, 18 years. So you look at Mike Sullivan, I think nothing that he's done this year is going to warrant him getting any heat over the offseason, which means he's going to make it to next year perfectly fine. And I think the same goes for Letang. But next year is the question for me, because what happens between now and August to the Penguins lineup? I agree with you. Mike Sullivan is a good coach at the NHL level. Look no further than what we saw at the Four Nations face-off. When he has the players to run his system works very well. The problem is he hasn't had the players to run his system in Pittsburgh for the last 5 years. It's a system built for younger talent. He might have just been stubborn enough and secure enough that he kept his system in place, and the younger talent might have circled back around. They went from being a young team in 2016-17 to being one of the oldest teams in the league for the past 5 years and not having success with this system to all of a sudden 20-year-olds are popping out of nowhere and jumping into the lineup. The more you see that shift back to a younger team, the more Mike Sullivan's system is going to work. But if he can make it through next year, I think that he'll make it to the end of Crosby's career. Because next year is still the inflection point where, yeah, there's young guys coming, but are they going to be here and ready by next season? And with it being Malkin's last, there's going to be added pressure to get back at the very least into the playoffs. So if it's not working halfway through the season, they might be forced to make a move. Now, again, I don't know how they view this. They might say, listen, there's no chance in hell that Mike Sullivan is going anywhere. We're going to let him see this through because Tang loves him and Malkin loves him and all the things that you've heard. But I think if he gets through next season, the year following, he will have enough young talent that his system will once again be able to be utilized at a high level among the NHL. So next year's the big year. If Sullivan gets through that, then my answer is Letang. But the question is, I'm not sure if Sullivan gets through that with the added pressure, the added expectations of Geno's last year, and whatever we're going to see this offseason, because Josh Yohe said it in The Athletic, and I think everybody is well aware. Pens have 11 draft picks this year. They're not picking 11 players. So what do they do with that, plus the crazy amounts of cap space that they're going to have to play with this summer? That's going to change the expectations. And if he falls short of those, that's when I think the heat gets turned up. So I'm going to say what's more likely to happen first as we stand here today, Sullivan. Letang is not that far off, though, because he has been all types of awful in recent months. And I don't need to go into it deeply, but I mean, he is second among Penguins defensemen in ice time at 5-on-5. There's 9 Penguins that have played 5-on-5 ice time since the Four Nations. He's 8th in shot attempts percentage, 9th in expected goals percentage, 7th in expected goals allowed per 60, and 8th in scoring chances allowed per 60. He is one of the worst defensemen on the Penguins since Four Nations, and it's not particularly close. And that's underlying numbers. The eye test tells you the same thing. There's days where the effort doesn't look right. There's days where the mental doesn't look right, and he's all over the place. There's days where he takes awful penalties. The one last night in overtime was not one of them. That was a horrific call. That's not on Letang. But a lot of the other stuff we've seen is on Letang. So while I think the answer to this question is Sullivan, Letang is certainly not sitting pretty with the Penguins organization where it stands right now and where his performance is, especially with 3 years left on that contract.
Yeah, the 3 years thing is pretty tough. If it's worth anything, Letang's contract does run longer than Mike Sullivan's. At bare minimum, I don't see the Penguins extending Mike Sullivan early.
Ahead of time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's especially considering Ron Hextall did it 2 years in advance. This is the first season of that deal. We have to remember that. This year right here is the first year of that. Forgot all about that. And for what it's worth, Lane Hudson's a left shot defenseman. Pairing him with Kris Letang would be so much fun on a power play.
Yes and no, because we said the same thing about Letang and Karlsson. That has never worked.
That's 2 right shots, though. I mean,
yeah, that's true. I don't know. I think we're at the point now where if Letang goes anywhere, he's going somewhere as a second or third pairing defenseman.
That's why I said power play. I mean, you're right about that when it comes to they're not going to share 5-on-5 time. There's no way. Montreal does not have enough defensive forwards to cover for that. Jake Evans can only do so much. But those 2 on a power play, they both feed. They will both feed Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, and forgetting it, Juraj Slafkovsky.
Yeah.
That sounds scary to me in a couple years.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with Kris Letang. Again, this is a guy that the fitness is probably not the issue, right? Like of all the players on the Penguins, of all the aging players on the Penguins, he's probably in the best shape of all of them. Mm-hmm. So it's not that. So whatever it is, if he can figure it out, he could probably return to being a fairly decent player, but he just hasn't been that in the last couple of months. And I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's who he's playing with, because him and Grzelcyk together is just not a pairing that works. And he's had a revolving door. It's kind of a similar conversation that we have with Malkin. I don't know. Maybe it's wrong of me to have a little bit more leeway with Malkin than I do with Letang. But I also just think the bottom has fallen out on Letang's performance more so than it has on Evgeni Malkin's. And more of that is mental than anything. I think Malkin has played mentally fairly solid season. I think mentally Letang, which always has been a bugaboo of his, is there's always times where he's out of position. And in the past, it's, hey, you take the good with the bad, because whenever he is on, he's extremely good. Him being on this year hasn't been extremely good, so it doesn't make up for as much of the bad. But again, maybe it's prisoner of the moment, but it feels like Letang ending his career in Pittsburgh, as you mentioned, has been talked about, and it's becoming less and less likely, it feels, by the year. We'll have to wait and see